What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from High Mind Hobbies, and last weekend I participated in a RTT, and my beautiful Vanguard Onslaught Tyranids, they went 3-0. We did really, really well, so I just wanted to make a video talking about my success, talking about the list, and talking about the tactics that I used in order to get that 3-0 finish that we are all searching for when we go to an RTT. If you like this kind of content, comment, like, subscribe, do all those cool things, but let's talk about the list. So this is my list, and this was, I will have a note, not a lot changed for Tyranids, but this was my list before the balanced data slate. So the balanced data slate actually came out a day before this RTT happened, so the TO was like, we're not going to use the balanced data slate. So, you know, but I do think there was only one matchup that did kind of change, I think, now with the slate. And I actually think the matchup is even better for me now. So I would just use those same tactics, of course, going from there. But enough about that. Here's the list. Vanguard Onslaught and my characters. I have 3 Broodlords, 2 Hyper-Adapted Ravener squads. I have my Death Leaper, and he's my Warlord because if I went up against Imperial Knights, I did not want to give up a free, I don't know, their Valorous thing or whatever it's called. It's a neat little trick. If you have Death Leaper as your Warlord and you're playing against Knights, you just hide him the whole time. Job done. He can't be got by some big spooky robot. He's chilling. Then next I have a Neurotyrant, just to give some synapse to the lictors and make the battle shock just a little bit better when I pop shadows. Also, his Flamer is really good at clearing screens if he gets up there a little bit further up, but oftentimes I just used him to screen my back left corner of my deployment, since everything else in the army is just going. Then I have a Winged Tyranid Prime, and I have a Winged Hive Tyrant. So the Winged Tyranid Prime is going to be going with a squad of Tyranid Warriors, of course. This list I took with Warriors because I didn't have my 30 Raveners built. Honestly, that's the main reason why I took Warriors instead of Raveners. But there's a couple lists that I've been playing with that might have both. But let's talk about the rest of the list real quick. I've got a Biovore because I'm playing Tyranids, and you take a Biovore. I have 2 10-man Genestealer squads, and then 1 5-man Genestealer squad. The 5-man Genestealer squad performed pretty well this weekend. I think the -1 to hit in combat and the 5 invulnerable saves actually make the Genestealers, I don't want to use the word durable, but a little bit tricky to kill. And we have triple Lictor. That's pretty much how I'm starting every single Vanguard Onslaught list. And then 2 Raveners, you know, to join those Hyper-Adaptives or not. And then Tyranid Warriors, like I talked about. Now, my round 1 was a very interesting game. I was playing against a Kroot Tau list. This guy's name was Jack. He was very cool. This is a very friendly game, and I really, really had such a great time with him. His list name was titled, well, he had 2 titles. One of the titles was like 31 Gorillas, and he had 30 of the Kroot Gorillas, and he was saying that he was the 31st gorilla. So very, very cool. Very interesting army. I think Vanguard Onslaught honestly has a very, very good matchup into an army like this. The Kroot want to scout and put a bunch of pressure on you and kind of try and jail you. And then Vanguard Onslaught is actually pretty okay with responding to melee pressure as long as I can dictate where the combat goes and everything. And then I think Vanguard Onslaught is also better at jailing than the Kroot are. So especially because in this game, I went first. And I did win 85-36. It was a pretty convincing win on the Tyranids part. And it was a very bloody first couple of turns. In addition, each time I play Vanguard Onslaught, if I'm bringing 20 Raveners, I look at my opponent's melee or my opponent's defensive profiles on all of the units. And if I feel like my Raveners by themselves, just the regular 5-man Raveners, can solo a couple of squads, you know, if I feel like they're pretty good trading to almost anything in the list, then I'm going to split the Raveners, right? So in this matchup, I ended up splitting all of my Raveners, so I had just 4 squads of Raveners that could do actions or put melee pressure on, and it was very, very versatile, and it was very, very effective in this game. So I got round 1, I got turn 1, and I charged all 3 of my Genestealer bricks just in one go. And part of that is because I wanted to keep the pressure, but also very interestingly, Jack scouted towards me. And you know, I don't know if you're a Kroot Tau player watching this video, that would be very interesting for one. And two, don't scout towards the Vanguard Onslaught army, right? Because you're just giving them a whole bunch of charges. And I just charged with all 3 Genestealer bricks. The 5-man went into the center with into a 6-man gorilla pack or whatever. I knew that the 5-man was not going to probably pick up that unit, but I knew that the gorilla guys were going to have a harder time to kill them, especially if they weren't charging, because they get mortals on the charge. So if I charge them first, then I'm just keeping them in place and they don't get to really do anything. Then I had one 10-man brick up top who just charged, I think, 2 or 3 units. I knew the Genestealers were going to do quite a bit of damage and killed, I think, killed 2 units right there. I think killed a 10-man Kroot squad and then a squad of the Hounds as well. And then I just piled into the rest of the Kroot. I don't think I piled into the 20-man because I didn't really want, you know, a whole 20-man to just get me, but I definitely did pile into another Kroot squad at the top that was attached to a character. And the reason why I did pile into that, even though the character had okay melee, actually, is because the character was so strung out back, like so far back in the squad, that even with a pile in, the character was not going to be able to activate into the squad. So all I was really facing was like, I don't know, 6 Kroot close combat weapons, and it was not really going to deal too much to the Genestealers. And then after that, I just kind of like put pressure and kept on wave after wave. I believe I did start the all Raveners. No, I did my 2 Hyperadaptives were in the sky, or down below rather, and then my 2 regular Ravener squads were on the table. So as soon as I sent out my Genestealers, I then of course, you know, staged up my Raveners and had them move behind. And you can see this right here in this picture. I'm not great at taking pictures. It's a skill that I'm working on, but on the top part of this map right here, directly in front of the Hive Tyrant that is hanging out right there, that is one of my Ravener squads that had moved from the previous rune and is staged right up there. So the next turn they can go in. So I've jailed the jail list. If you see, I've got Genestealers still in his deployment, Raveners getting ready for a second wave, and then even Lictors were pretty good into this list. And then you can see direct and center underneath my giant dice is my big old 6-man Brick of Tyranid warriors ready to counteract anything that comes up. And in this case, I actually did do a turn 1 Shadows. And the reason why is I had Broodlords tagging so many different things that they were going to get the -1 from Synapse right out the gate. And then I have a Neurotyrant, so it's going to be -2. And then I had Deathleaper. I think I forgot to mention Deathleaper was also engaged with something. So there's going to be some units that had a -3 to the Battle Shock. I know it caps at 9 or whatever, but there was going to be quite a bit of Battle Shocks. And I actually wanted to just inhibit him from doing as many things as possible. So I popped Shadows and I Battle Shocked almost his entire army. So some things had a really hard time of falling back. And I threatened a couple of really good reactive moves, so that also kind of hampered where he wanted to go. And it just put him into a pretty like rough situation. And after he fell back with a couple of things, he did put his 20-man Kroot in the center of the field, and they were battle shocked actually. And I'm not really sure. I'll be honest with you, at this point, I'm not really sure what I do as the Kroot player, because I've put so much pressure on and I've put so much target saturation just directly into your deployment zone. But I don't think putting the 20-man out in the center was probably the correct call, especially because I had staged my warriors right there. And out of all the targets in the world for my warriors to want to go into, it is definitely a 20-man squad of Kroot warriors, or whatever they're called. So at the next turn, I was definitely getting ready to do a whole bunch of things. So yeah, it's all about staging. You can see the Raveners again on the bottom and the top, and then I knew I was going to put pressure on with the Tyranid warriors, and then even any Genestealers that are left after, and then whatever he was going to react to at that turn, I was then also going to rapid ingress Hyperadaptives. So I feel like Vanguard Onslaught, really the play pattern is just first wave, lining up the second wave, and then rapid ingressing in the final wave, like turn 3 or turn 4, and really just trying to dig in and seal that victory. And I did. So the score again was 85-36. Not too much else to talk about in this game besides just like talking about, making sure that you're staging your units appropriately, knowing when to put the pressure on, and knowing when to kind of like, dial back a little bit. And I think right out the gate, just understanding that my offensive profiles worked pretty well into his defensive profiles, getting the ability to split all my Raveners and really just having 3 huge waves of units just crashing into his army and really being able to take out key targets was very, very good. Moving right along. Oh, it's the content. It's the subscribe to the content page. If you're new here, come on in. Hit the subscribe button. We do TierNids content every single week. 1 to 2 videos a week. If I have extra time, I put out a second video, maybe a third video whenever I want to. I'm very engaged. I like answering all the comments and having discussions about why we love our beautiful bugs and how to get better at playing our beautiful bugs as well. Speaking of which, let's go to round 2. Round 2. Now, this is a very, very, very interesting game. I played against 1,000 Suns. And remember, this was before the data slate. So actually, this 1,000 Suns list was probably, I don't know, it had 2 Mutalith Vortex Beasts. It had Magnus. It had like a double Sorcerers. It had the goats, and it even had a winged demon prince that could do like the 6-inch deep strike and shoot me really hard. So this list has actually gone up quite a bit in points, and so I feel even happier about this one. And it was actually a close game. So we were on Purge the Foe, which in my opinion is one of the worst missions for Tyranids in general, and Vanguard Onslaught also doesn't love it either. We can mitigate it a little bit by having the bigger Ravener bricks just conjoined together and then not really giving up too many units, but it is still kind of it's a tough mission, and it is absolutely difficult to play into with Tyranids. So again, his name is Ron. He was a great guy. Again, all of these games, this RTT, I had a wonderful time with all my opponents, and I hope they can say the same. It was a really great time. But he was pretty much the standard 1,000 Suns, and he was playing the detachment where he had different psychic doctrines. He can get like +1 to wound, devastating wounds, and then I think increase his range of psychic weapons. I don't think any of those really paid or played too much into our game and how it worked. But yeah, so something very interesting that he did. He had played against Vanguard Onslaught before, and he was not excited about this game, and he deployed every single one of his unit either in strat reserves or on as far back on his table edge. So this picture that I have right here that's his table edge. He measured out my threat range from my deployment zone, what I could do with advancing and charging and getting over there, and he was like, all of my stuff is safe over here. And then at the bottom right there, you can see he also had a Predator with all las cannons. So it was very, very interesting deployment. On any other primary mission besides Purge, I think that this is just like a slam dunk easy win for me, because I can just take the objectives, hold them off, and then I'm just going to score primary. But the fact that it's Purge the Foe actually means that depending on when he goes, it can actually be kind of detrimental to me and hard for me to interact with, because all of his stuff is all the way back there. However, he did go first, and he ended up playing very, very aggressively. Again, I probably would have preferred to actually go, I don't know, maybe go first in this, but it's also hard to tell because bottom of score primary is so strong. But I think me going first and staging and not really letting him get to places that he ended up getting to might have been good for me as well. And if you can see, this is kind of how I've deployed. And I wanted to take a second before we talk about the gameplay and everything to just my little bit of deployment here. I'm working on getting better at taking pictures, I promise. But this was table 7, so it's, people call it trenches because, it's just like a trench. You can hop through trenches, and it really, really allows for an army like Vanguard Onslaught to hide wherever they want. And this is kind of how I deployed. I've got lictors that are going to be a little bit forward, but they're not really threatened just because they can sit behind terrain like that. And this is just staging out the wazoo. Like, I can stage all of my 25 Gene Stealers right there. Depending if I go first or second, they can scout behind cover and make sure that they're safe. so on and so forth. It's a really, really good table for us. Anyways, turn 1, he pushed forward very, very aggressively. He moved all of his big units basically as far as they could. Magnus was just in a spooky spot right in the direct center of his rune. I couldn't really do too much to Magnus, and I think he knew that turn 1. And then he really, really kind of pressured for a turn 2, which is kind of very interesting because it was like an exact contrast to the way that he deployed. And then he just really pushed all of his units out and was kind of saying, like, I'm coming to get you turn 2, basically, is what I felt like. So it was difficult to play around. I, for one hand, I kind of played the, okay, I'm all right with you coming to get me. And my Lictor at the bottom there, so when I deploy him, I always deploy him off the objective, of course, because I don't want a free overwhelming force from my opponent. But I put that Lictor on the objective, and then I put my Death Leaper and Lictor on my top expansion objective, meaning if he didn't come out and if he didn't push me off those objectives, I was going to score hold more primary, and I was going to already be ahead in primary, even if I wasn't going to kill anything. And maybe that kind of swayed his decision, because he then pushed really, really hard round 2 and sent almost everything. Yeah, turn 2, he sent Magnus directly at me alongside a Mutolith Vortex Beast and staged Rhino with both of the sorcerers. You can see in this picture in the direct center, this is at the end of my movement phase, but you can see in the direct center there's that's at the beginning of his next turn. This picture, sorry about that. But that's where he staged his Rhino, so he was really threatening, just pushing out another wave of stuff. So Magnus ended up charging the Lictor. No, excuse me. There was a Predator that charged the Lictor to try and get it off of that objective to force me to, not get the hold more, which is exactly what I wanted. Plus, a Predator is not really doing too much into Vanguard Onslaught, especially since it had all of the last cannons. So I think he was kind of okay just trying to tank shock, and then maybe the Predator kills the Lictor, in a weird swing of events. So that Predator charged the Lictor, and then he had a Mutolith Vortex Beast that also came out and then charged that Lictor too. And then at that point, I made maybe a questionable move, but I did heroic with my 5-man squad of Gene Stealers and just heroicked into the Mutolith Vortex Beast, because I knew the number of attacks the Mutolith Vortex Beast has is not a whole lot of attacks, and plus it hits on 3s. So giving the Mutolith Vortex Beast -1 to hit, it's hitting on 4s. There's actually a pretty good chance that my Lictor survives through that, and then maybe my Gene Stealers get some chip damage. And then in addition, if he ends up going for the Gene Stealers instead of the Lictor, then I'm probably still going to have a Lictor to do some shenanigans for the rest of the game. And I'm kind of okay with just committing a trade piece like my 5-man Gene Stealer squad relatively early. That's kind of the job they have. Now, when I heroicked, he then charged Magnus into those Gene Stealers. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit spooked at that point, but I was not super, super concerned, because I had then rapid ingressed my 10-man Brick of Raveners behind that big staging ruin, and then my other 10-man Brick of Raveners behind the ruin at the bottom as well. So he had pushed Magnus up, and I was like, okay, sweet. If you're going to send big guns out, then I'm going to respond with my big guns as well. One more thing to note, his second Mutolith Vortex Beast was also on the bottom objective there of your screen, where I had staged Gene Stealers as well as that 10-man Ravener squad. So basically, he charged a Lictor, right? And he charged the 5-man Gene Stealer squad with, and he didn't even charge anything with the Mutolith Vortex Beast. He just towed on that objective, so I didn't get it. But he committed his Vortex Beast, Magnus, directly into the center of the field, and I basically just staged everything up. So he was almost trading Magnus and 2 Mutolith Vortex Beasts for a Lictor and a Gene Stealer. And that's the kind of scenario that you are wanting to try and put your opponent in, to try and make the trades just be overwhelming in your favor, especially with an aggressive army like Vanguard Onslaught, so that you can kind of snowball the rest of the game and then just kind of win from there. So when I got to activate, you can actually see the top part of that picture, that center hole right there between my Raveners and Gene Stealers. That's where Magnus used to be. I did surprise assault on the Raveners, and I rolled 18 dice at once, because that's how I split it. I do 18 first and then 15 the other time. And then the first number of attacks just kind of deleted Magnus. Because I think at this point, he really, really wanted to push. So he didn't have Magnus be the -1 damage. He did +2 to movement, which I think probably was not the correct call. But it's what was happening. If I was not going to be able to counterpunch like that, then I probably lose the game on the spot because of 2 Mutalith Vortex Beasts and Magnus. And I guess one more thing to note is I also moved up my Tyranid Warriors into the center there. I had wanted them to also charge that Rhino. I think it was a 6-inch charge, and they failed it with a CP. So I put my Lictor there instead, so that it was actually going to be a little bit difficult for him to fall back his Rhino or disembark in any kind of meaningful way. And then after this big, huge fight, which I feel like I came out on the winning side, it was still a bloody game. It was still not like absolutely sealed in my favor, and I really had to scrap the rest of the game. I really had to utilize all of my units as best as I could. But, you know, again, ended up getting the victory. It was 78-68 in my favor. It was a really, really good game. Again, this was before the slate. I expect the matchup to probably be better now. I think he probably would have like one less unit. Maybe he shifts his, I don't know, maybe he shifts his strategy. I think Thousand Sons are still taking Magnus. I think Magnus is still very strong. But yeah, they got hit pretty hard in the balanced data slate. When you are playing against Thousand Sons, you really want to do 2 things, right? You want to bait the Overwatch early, and you want to bait the Overwatch with something that really, really doesn't matter. Like if you, I don't know, like a Lictor or something, or if you have a Gargoyle squad that you're just running out there, something like that, you know. And I do the tried and true. After you move a unit, you look at your opponent and you say, would you like to Overwatch that? You know, I'm not being mischievous at all, maybe a little bit, but the number of times that I ask, would you like to Overwatch that? And my opponent goes, sure, before they really think about the other units that are about to come out and punch them in the face, like maybe a Brick of Raveners. Sometimes it does work in your favor. One more thing I do want to note, and this is honestly just for me taking notes on myself. After those Raveners killed Magnus, I didn't pile into the Mutalith Vortex Beast because I was worried about the Vortex Beast activating into them. I should have just piled into the Vortex Beast, because at that point they had Gene Stealers, a Hive Tyrant, and then they would have had Raveners into the Mutalith Vortex Beast. And it probably would have actually saved me quite a bit of Raveners, because on his following turn, he did get a chance to kill quite a bit of Raveners because they were just not engaged. But again, after that big turn 2, where I can counteract with Raveners that are rapid ingress and a whole bunch of Gene Stealers and Tyranid Warriors in the center of the field, I kind of was able to just snowball from there. And it was, I want to say it was a done deal, because I still had to work pretty hard. But it was a good game after that. And the last note on this game is Purge the Foe sucks. I really don't like playing Purge the Foe, because it's just kind of tough, you know? And I do realize that it is a cornerstone of Warhammer 40k, but it definitely punishes Tyranids with all of our Gribbly guys, as well as our Spore Mines and everything. It's very cool stuff. Moving on to our third and final round. This was Hidden Supplies, the one where we pick up objectives throughout the game, and then the last objective in the center, you get 15 points if you hold it at the end of the game, which is kind of crazy, or rather when you score primary. So another great opponent again. This was just such a wonderful place to play. I really enjoyed all my opponents here. His name was Chase, and he was playing a pretty cool Tau list. It was Mont Ka with a Storm Surge. He had like a Storm Surge, he had 1 Riptide, 1 Ghost Keel, then he had a Devilfish full of the Breachers for that Wombo combo, which is very spooky, and then I think he had 3 squads of Crisis Suits. So definitely a different kind of variety of Tau that you normally see, especially with the Storm Surge. But again, it's RTT, so some people are experimenting with some things. Some people are bringing different things that they normally might not bring at a big old GT or something. But it was you know, it was pretty strong. I was at the exact same table, so it was table 7 again. So it was just going to be my same game plan. You know, I was going to try and get my opponent to commit some resources a little bit early, with my trading units, like my lictors, maybe my 5-man gene stealers or something. And then I was going to try and rapid ingress with heavy staging units like gene stealers and everything. And then really, hopefully, deliver a punch that effectively knocks out my opponent for the game. I went second. My plan was to not be shot and to react. And in addition, I was also planning out my shadows quite far in advance, because in hidden supplies, you only score no man's land objectives, right? And I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to keep them off objectives. My list that I have doesn't have gargoyles at this point, right? So I didn't have that back pocket denying you off of primary very, very easily by just sending gargoyles out. I had to be more proactive of either killing you off objectives or at a pivotal turn, pop shadows and make sure that I have as many negative bonuses around those units that are important with primary to possibly pop shadows. So I'm going to, of course, keep my Neuro Tyrant safe, so I get that native -1. I'm going to maybe commit my Death Leaper to a place where he can affect them, and then I'm going to make sure that a Broodlord is tagging something and giving that -1 for the Synapse. So that's kind of my game plan with shadows. I was hoping to do it on turn 3, and I believe I did do it on turn 3. Next thing is, I didn't even ask what the defensive profile of the Storm Surge was. I knew it was just this big, dumb, idiot model that was just going to sit in the center or somewhere and just shoot at my army. Anytime something was even in sight of it, I knew that I was going to pick up units. So I didn't really feel like it was going to be worth my game plan to commit any of my resources into trying to kill it, because it was just not going to happen. And so instead, I played the game basically ignoring the Storm Surge. I think I piled into it a couple of times, but just going around killing the units around it and trying to stay on the Storm Surge's objective if I needed to out OC it. And one more thing that was very, very important in deployment is I pre-measured the distance in which the Devilfish bomb, meaning the Devilfish transport, and the breachers could reach. I wanted to know the lines of sight on it and everything, so I pre-measured that to make sure that all of my important units were going to be safe from that. I did not want to be punished by the, Devilfish all of a sudden moving 18 inches, disembarking 3, and then getting rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound and just deleting one of my very important squads. So that was something that I was paying very, very close attention to. Now, looking into the gameplay, turn 1, he went first, and he staged his Devilfish on the backside of my expansion ruin right here, so that he could move out in the next turn and kind of push forward with that. He didn't want to commit too much. He did put the Storm Surge directly on my expansion, or no, his expansion objective. He was basically saying, this is mine, and he just kind of did some indirect and tried to chip away at my 5-man Gene Stealer brick. So my reaction to that was, on his expansion, I don't think I committed to too much over there, but on my expansion, I advanced up my Gene Stealers, I charged the Devilfish with the Gene Stealers, and then I went around the other side with one of my Lictors, and I charged the Lictor on the other side of the Devilfish. I kind of created like a pincer move to basically bubble wrap the transport. So the idea is that the Gene Stealers pop the transport, because they're going to do that, and then my Lictor is going to pile in to whatever unit comes out from that transport, and then I'm going to be able to do quite a bit of damage to those breachers, and then also maybe protect my Gene Stealers from them. So by kind of placing those units very strategically, I was able to pop the transport, and then he didn't really have any space to put out his breachers, and then the Lictor was going to be able to just tie them down for another turn. In addition, I've talked about this before, but on this, I'm going to always put my Lictors on objectives directly in front of one of my punching units, like my Gene Stealers or Raveners or even Warriors, and really allow for them to force the primary issue, have my opponent come out, take me off primary, and then I can, give a really nice upward trade. And since I was bottom of the turn, I really wanted to do as little as possible. I wanted my opponent to come out and then for me to react. And in doing so, I even saved my Warriors until the very end of the game so that they could just walk onto the center objective and get that 15 points that would absolutely catapult me into victory. So I'm talking about the ideal position when I'm setting up these things. I want to think about opponents with their important pieces in the center of the board. That's what I really, really want. I want my opponent to have to come out, do something in the center of the board, and then I'm going to stage my entire army behind that. In addition, if my opponent lines up their units in a line, then I can, leapfrog from one unit to the next with pile-ins and consolidates, and really kind of control the game, the flow of the game. And I'm also looking to screen out my opponent's reserves, so then I can have a clean rapid ingress without line of sight on any of their shooting weapons, and then just be able to advance and charge and head straight into melee from that. In addition, in this game, I also used my Hive Tyrant's free strat to pick himself up, and then also rapid ingress. I was using him almost as a screening piece this game, which I don't love doing, and in my new list, I'm probably going to change that. But he's kind of like a late game beat stick that you can really actually make pretty good use of if you use his free stratagem, pick him up, put him back into reserves, rapid ingress, and we're deep strike him somewhere where it's really, really cool. And then he did reserve a good amount of his crisis suits. I was able to screen out the board as best as I could and save those warriors for the last bit of primary that absolutely sealed the deal. Now, if we're talking about a picture to show the ideal position here, this was turn 3. I believe I had rapid ingressed, and then I think my Raveners had charged a crisis suit unit and just deleted it immediately. So they are right there. Now, if I were to go back in time, I would have tried to do the charge where all of those Raveners can tuck behind that template, because subsequently on my opponent's turn, with that incredible Storm Surge and the Riptide and everything, they were able to get blown up very easily. But if you notice, also on my expansion objective over there, I have another 10-man squad of Raveners that are waiting to come on in, and then I have 2 squads of Gene Stealers that are going to charge forward, kill that Riptide pretty convincingly, and then just kind of go from there. Again, I'm reacting to my opponent's moves, and I'm really allowing for them to either make mistakes or for them to develop the board, and then for me to react it, as opposed to exposing my units first. The final score was 72-34. Pretty convincing victory for the Tyranids, and it propelled me into 2nd place. It was just very, very good game. I was able to react to the entire time, and I feel like I probably could have kept a Lictor back instead of the Warriors, but I just felt like I was in a whole lot of control of the game, and it really did actually allow for me to either, if my opponent pushed really far pressure with a spooky unit, then my Warriors were there to react, but also at the same time, my Warriors were just going to be able to walk onto the center objective and get me 15 more points very, very quickly. 5-man Gene Stealers, they're pretty durable, and I don't think they died the entire game. It was very strange. They were just there tagging crisis suits and everything, and allowing for me to just keep this trading unit throughout the game. And again, bottom turn scoring is very, very strong if you can adapt your strategy to it. So 2nd place, I'm very happy with that. I had low points. I didn't really score into the 90s with any of these. Maybe that's something that I try to adjust, but honestly, if I'm winning the game, I'm winning the game, right? And that specific list that I was playing went down 20 points. From now on, I am probably going to run 30 Raveners. My plan for this weekend is to build and paint 15 of them. So I'll have plenty of Raveners for me to do that. I'm very excited about that. The reason why I'm more keen on Raveners than the Warriors is the Warriors not deep striking was actually pretty lackluster. I didn't love that because that means I really couldn't actually rapid ingress them, especially on all of the deployments that we were on. There wasn't really comfortable spots for them to land. So them being Raveners instead, and me having to spend, I think it's like 80 more points or something. That's a lot of points. However, I think the deep strike and the extra amount of bodies is definitely worth it. I might play around with fitting some Neurolictors. The ideal would be 2 Neurolictors, 2 Lictors, a Death Leaper, and Neurotyrant to just have a really, really strong Lone Op package, as well as a really annoying Battle Shock package. Like if I do Shadows and then everything is Battle Shocked, and then my Neurolictors allow for my Raveners to get +1 to wound on a whole bunch of stuff, as well as Lictors or Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers with +1 to wound is very, very cool. But I don't know if the points are going to be there. And a part of that is I have to test 5 man gene stealers a little bit more. I think one of the roads to having that list with that Battleshock package that I mentioned was dropping to 2 5-man gene stealer squads and then only 1 10-man gene stealer squad. I'm not really sure if that's where I want to be, but it is definitely going to be an option. Regardless of whatever I end up doing with that, I'm very excited to play Vanguard Onslaught. I'm having a whole lot of fun with the detachment, and I hope you're enjoying it as well, if that is one of the detachments that you are interested in. Which brings me to my last and probably most important comment/question. What do you think? What do you think about the list that I played? What do you think about the tournament? I know I'm working on getting better at taking pictures and the layouts and everything, so please forgive me for not as many visual aids as I would like, but it is always hard to balance playing a game with somebody and then saying, oh, I have to take a picture for my YouTube channel or something. You know, that seems tough to do, but next time I do one of these, I will absolutely do my best to have a better visual aids. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all those cool things, and I'll see you next time. Bye.